and let's say I just purely wanted to be the owner, nothing else but the owner, I would probably have to hire a manager.
Hey everybody, Pat and Doug back again with another episode of the Wealthy Fitness Entrepreneur, and today we are going to talk money. Wow, what a fun topic. So Doug, talk some money. Let's go.
Yeah, I know it's depending upon how it's going for you, it might be a fun topic or not so fun topic. But as a gym owner, we want to make sure we're certainly having a plan for the money. And I think that's where I would start is what's our kind of money model with our business, right? What are the buckets that our money goes into? And that way, as things grow, those buckets don't change, right? Regardless of whether you're running a $20,000 a month business or $100,000 a month business, the three buckets that I'll speak about don't change. The percentages don't change, but obviously the dollar amount changes. The size of that bucket may get bigger as you grow. But those three buckets really don't change. And that really helped me once I wrapped my head around that, because, as you continue to grow your business, you can grow yourself into a not so profitable business where you're just adding clients, you're growing top line, but you're also growing your expenses. And so your margin gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So I think it would be a good place to really unpack what are the three buckets that we need to put our money into as a gym owner, and that way we continue to watch our profit, our take home go up, not continue to see that squeezed.
Yeah, I think that most of us that got into this industry didn't have a incredibly strong background in business or finance, and it's not just this kind of instinctual thing. It's not something anybody ever taught you in exercise science class. It's not something that's provided as part of a certifications curriculum. So yeah, unpack it bucket by bucket and let's get to it.
Sure. So three buckets. Bucket number one, which is always going to be our biggest as we continue to grow, is going to be your payroll, right? So your people bucket. And a good healthy percentage is somewhere between 30 and 40% of your revenue goes towards payroll. I would personally never advise going above 40%. That may not sound like a lot, but when you factor in all the other expenses that you have and making sure you save some for yourself, we want to make sure that only 40% goes to payroll. Now, that would include any of your people related or payroll related expenses. So that's obviously going to include their pay wages, any commissions, bonuses, anything like that would be considered part of that 40%. That would also include any benefits that you provide for them. Anything that, I wouldn't necessarily include like education. I would consider that a separate expense if you're, providing staff training or continuing education. But think, what does your payroll company deduct from your account? Any of those expenses, payroll taxes, right? All of that is part of that 40%. The other, I always get asked this question, so I want to address it right off the bat, that I do like to include a manager pay for you. So most of us in our businesses are the manager, the general manager. That's if we were to strip away, yes, we're also the owner, potentially, but we often are doing kind of traditional manager type roles, meaning we're creating the marketing plan for the month. We are selling new clients. We are training the team. And of course, you may be coaching as well. So I always think if I had to replace myself, and let's say I just purely wanted to be the owner, nothing else but the owner, I would probably have to hire a manager. And so I want to make sure that I create margin so that when that day does come, and if I choose to step away, I have the payroll to take it from paying myself as the manager to actually paying the manager. So for example, if 40% of your gross revenue is 20,000, maybe 16,000 of that is going to your staff and you're taking 4,000 of that as a manager salary. Now we'll talk about owner distribution and kind of the profit, which you'll also take a percentage of. But this is being kind of a fair market value paid for your time, day-to-day hours in the gym. So that's the 40% bucket. Um, and frankly, just try to remember not and try to stay disciplined to not go above it. It can be challenging to do as you continue to grow, but we want to make sure that we're keeping, that margin in place and not over hiring. We're in a business that does not have a margin to be able to overhire or overstaff. So we want to keep that under 40%. The second bucket is really everything else. We would call that BOE, or base operating expenses. That's 30%, ideally under 30%. So we're now at 70%. That's your rent, your utilities, your softwares, your insurances. If you pay for, continuing education or mentorship or any of your other expenses that you have in a month, that should be no more than 30% of your revenue, of your gross revenue. And again, as those expenses climb, as you make decisions, do I take this additional expense on? By staying under that 30%, you're still going to protect the third bucket, which is your profit. And so ideally in this business, we're shooting for somewhere between 25 and 30% margin. And that is that third bucket. By keeping 30 cents of every dollar, you're able to retain that profit margin of 30%. Now, obviously this is business and none of it's guaranteed. So there may be months where that is only 20% and your BOE ends up being 35%. But if we base our budget, if we base our spending off of the 40, 30, 30, we set ourselves up for a strong chance of retaining 30%. And then the last thing I would address with that third bucket is always like, okay, well, what do I do with that 30%? And the simple answer is it depends on what your financial situation is. If you have no reserves, no savings for your gym business, then I would be taking the bulk of that 30% that's left over. And, certainly goal number one would be to get to that 30%. And then anything that's left over, build up your reserves. And then once your reserves are met, then we can, have that to invest outside of the gym. So those are the three buckets that I would break our money up into.
So a couple things to maybe dive deeper on. So when you talk about reserves, there are different kind of ways of thinking about it, anywhere from 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, operating expenses. Where do you fall on that continuum?
For this business, for a fitness business, and if you have a reoccurring base, I don't think you need more than 3. Especially, at this level, you're probably not brand new to business. You probably, have what I would call a receivable base, meaning you have reoccurring revenue projected for next month coming in. Of course, that there's gonna be months where that goes up and down, but it's probably not going to go from like 30 to 0 overnight. And so for that reason, we don't need as much for reserves, in my opinion. So 2 to 3 months is a good healthy number where you're not, you don't have nothing and you're not, worried about where you're gonna, find payroll money for, and you're able to, pull a little bit if you have a down month, but it's also not so much that just is sitting there, kind of being wasted, frankly.
All right.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's pretty simple, pretty straightforward, but often overlooked. So I think that's the beauty of something like that, is just cleaning that up and utilizing those 3 buckets can really put you in the driver's seat as a business owner. And if we talk about, this being the Wealthy Fitness Entrepreneur podcast, I don't care how much gross revenue you're bringing in. If you don't have control of your money, you're not going to build wealth. And so this is a very straightforward way to build wealth. So, Doug, anything else you want to touch on?
Yeah, I think protecting that 30% is really what we're going after, right? With this model, it's by staying strict with the 40 and the 30, the 40% to payroll and the 30% towards expenses. Like you said, you're protecting that profit. And, certainly having that plan for the money. So from like a tactical perspective, the other thing I would add on to this is, you can reverse engineer like we've done in other episodes where we reverse engineer our client goal. You can reverse engineer your sales goal with this number. So if you look ahead and we're recording this in an April month. So if I'm looking ahead into May and I'm like, okay, May, my payroll is going to be 20,000 for the month of May. I write down all my expenses other than payroll, and I'm at another, what is that, 15,000. Okay, as an example. So now I'm 35,000 in, all in, just to pay the bills, just to break even. Then I would tack on 30% to that. So let's call that 10 grand for simple math. So now I'm at a sales goal of 45 grand. So now I've just kind of married my financial situation with my sales goal, and this is where it can all kind of work together. I can take my sales goal and marry it with my marketing plan and make sure that my marketing plan is beefy enough, is structured enough to generate $45,000 in revenue. And now, obviously, hopefully, you're not having to go generate $45,000 in revenue. You would subtract out what you have projected for revenue. So maybe your base operating expenses or your base operating reoccurring revenue is 40,000 for membership. So now it's like, okay, how do I go generate that 5 grand gap? So that's the final kind of point I would say with this stuff is it's not just a theory, it's a monthly plan that you use, right? So build out your payroll plan, build out your base operating expense plan, and then that creates your, add on your 30% margin, and that creates your sales goal for the month.
Very good. Well, another episode in the books for the wealthy fitness entrepreneur, and we'll be back soon with another episode. Talk to you later.